Hello everyone and welcome to the stream. This is Otaku Showboat. Today is Sunday, June 14th, 2020. If you're watching the VOD on YouTube, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you are so inclined, head on over to twitch.tv/OtakuShowboat to leave a follow to be notified when I go live Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 10 a.m. to approximately 1 p.m. US Eastern Time. You can do all of the social stuff through the links below the video, including supporting Pyandon's Mon's development at patreon.com/Pyandon and myself at patreon.com/otakushowboat. So, today, lots of things. Lots of things. Yes, things, stuffs, updates. Right now, a lot of the Pie Suite has been updated. The updates are going live. I have not updated to the most recent updates, but I do know some of the things that are in those updates. Things like changes to solder, for instance. Solder is being changed. There's not going to be a molten solder, and there's going to be like a whole bunch of updates to hot air processing as well, which is interesting stuff that is likely going to break things. So I'm not going to be doing any of those updates for us live today. Now, I'm also going to assume that the Alien Life update, when it goes through, is also going to include the changes to the fungal substrate that we were expecting as well, which doubles the output of these recipes, as well as feeds back the petri dishes, the empty petri dishes. So that is a thing that I am expecting to happen soon once that release goes out, as well as like a whole bunch of other like smaller changes. I think those are the like really big parts. Maybe some additional features will make their way into this. I'm not certain if the two other things are going to be part of this. Logistic station. Yeah, that is part of this. You've finished your underground Digosaurus stuff, King. All right. Well, apparently that's supposed to be in it. So that's another big feature added to the mid to late game. So Immortal is late. What did Immortal miss? Nothing really. Just me saying that I am not updating yet because there's stuff that's going to be broken. Yeah. So off-screen stuff. A lot's happened. A lot has happened between last time and this time. If I bring up the clock, I don't really remember what hour we were on prior, but we're now at 5:42 hours. So I spent a little bit of time off screen doing stuff, and things. In particular, I set up gold. All right, so only the logistics station and not the actual full underground logistics setup. All right, cool. Well, I set up gold. I set up particle accelerated gold off screen as the very like first thing that I did. If I can even find my majestic particle accelerator that exists here, I've got a bit of gold now. I've got a little bit of gold now from this. Now, note that this requires proton donors as a thing. Proton donors. Well, proton donors require boron to make. Proton donors require boron and crystallographic substrate. Now, crystallographic substrate, I sort of already have all this stuff, so that's not new, really. Just placing the building down to make the crystallographic substrate. I have everything, and just I added extra propene for this. Like we've sort of seen all the stuff that goes into this, but boron was actually new-ish. It requires powderizing boron trioxide, and then adding acetylene and aluminium to make a mixture that then you add refined syngas and hydrogen chloride to make the actual boron. And you may notice a little something with these extra little icons here that's happened because of this. So the whole point of the gold, is that gold was what I needed to start making modules. And I knew that it would take a while, a very long time of just sitting and waiting for modules to happen. It would take a very long time to sit and wait for modules to happen. So that is what I've done, basically. I have sat and waited a good amount of time for modules to happen. And as you can see, I've got some raw speed, some raw productivity, and some God Module 1s. Here's the thing that I've noticed about the God Module 1s. You can't actually use them on anything added in the Pi suite. So take, for example, Cermet here. That has productivity in it. I don't even remember if Cermet is a thing that is normal productivity or is one that is modded. I guess it's one that's base productivity, because if it was modified to accept productivity through my Productive Pyandons mod, it would say that the recipe has been modified by the Productive Pyandons mod. I'm pretty sure. So normally this takes productivity, right? So one would imagine that the God module would be valid in here on this recipe, right? Wrong. Wrong. Productivity cannot be used on this recipe. Only applied to the God module. Raw productivity can be used. Normal productivity can be used. Not God modules, though. And as it turns out, that applies to literally every single recipe that is added in the Pi suite. Every single added Pi suite recipe that applies to. So as it turns out, I can't actually use God modules on anything that's not vanilla. What is special with God modules? Well, the God modules are basically a combined module of speed, effectivity, and productivity. Hello! Welcome! I'm talking modules right now. And the off-screen stuff that I did. So, the God Module 1 is basically the level 2 of the effectivity and productivity and speed. Yeah, so yeah, I should be able to use these, but there's something about them with every recipe added in the Pi suite that it says the text that comes up as productivity can't be used, but I mean, clearly that's wrong because productivity can be used. It's weird. It's really weird. Like, I expected not to be able to use God modules on anything that doesn't normally take productivity, such as a lot of the fluid stuff. Like, the vast majority of fluid stuff don't expect productivity on it. So, yeah, that was slightly annoying. However, I made very clear that it's only the recipes added in the Pi suite that this applies to. Every vanilla recipe can still use them. Any vanilla recipe that can accept productivity can use them, including ones that have been modified by the Pi suite to add additional things or change them completely. This includes circuits. So circuit 1s, as well as 2s and 3s, can accept God modules. So the actual final step for circuits 1, 2, and 3 can use them. Intelligent units, because they are a new recipe, they do not accept God modules. And of course, while I would normally be able to use the God modules in the production of science, every base game science recipe, I can't at the moment because the research center as a building does not accept productivity modules. So that's another thing to point out. The research center building disallows productivity modules, which means that you can't actually use productivity on any science. Now again, remember the whole vanilla recipe thing. This includes vanilla buildings, which means that I absolutely can use God modules on science buildings. So the science buildings can use it. There's not too much point, really. It's just a matter of scale that changes. I mean, minor reduction to power, but it ultimately does not matter between the God and the raw productivity modules here. It's like, do I really need a plus 40% speed on all of the science buildings that I have? Not particularly. Not particularly. And do I need a minus whatever energy consumption? I mean, I guess technically it would be plus 80% speed on each one of these with minus whatever energy. Minus 40 total energy. Like, but I mean, come on, it's 60 kilowatts of power per lab. That's not where I need to be saving power. So yeah, basically most things in the mall that can use productivity now have productivity associated with them. I have vastly scaled as well my production of circuit 1s and 2s to help speed up the process of making modules. So that is another thing is yeah, I've got this going. Note this number here. Like, if everything was operating smoothly, I would have that many fully per second. And for a time, as I was eating through buffers, I was producing this much of Circuit 2s at a time. And there was a time where this chest was, like, practically completely full until I also scaled up the Circuit 1s. But, yeah, we see transistors here are the issue at the moment. That's a lack of zinc on the transistors. From the light p-dope silicon, it's the zinc acetate that is the problem here, and it's just the zinc. It's the zinc. I'm making like 9 zinc per second or something overall, somewhere along those lines, and it's just all eaten. And yeah, filters also don't take productivity. That's one of the buildings that in my Productive Pythons mod that I released, that is a building I did not change to accept productivity because for the most part, it's not really... A lot of the recipes shouldn't have productivity, and the recipes that probably should is not worth that trade-off. You would have to manually go in every single recipe that uses a filter that's doing things like this with fluids and make them not do productivity. Because, really, you shouldn't be able to do the productivity on these. But on other things, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't really looked too much at a lot of the filter stuff. So, yeah, that's like the big thing. The really big thing. Another relatively big thing is, yeah, cadaveric aurum. Now Mark II buildings for the aurum. And I did change the recipe to a better recipe, but then I realized, oh hey, it's no longer 1-to-1 on seeds into aurum. It's now outputting more aurum than seeds in, which actually causes a little bit of a problem, to be completely honest. So with the aurum, if you're using a recipe that outputs more aurum than seeds in, basically every recipe that uses the aurum here, like the intended stuff that uses the aurum, also please ignore that I have modules in botanical nurseries. That's just a mod setting in the Pi suite that's currently causing that, and I don't think it should have any. But anyway, So these will always output 1 to 1 on all of the acid gas and DMS, which I added, and the DMS, which I added. So what ends up happening here is that these will consume 2 aurum, output 2 seeds. Those 2 seeds become more aurum than the 2 that were consumed due to these recipes. That in and of itself isn't so much of a problem, but you can't just straight up consume aurum. That is the problem. And that means that I have to now void the overflow of the seeds. So yeah, it's interesting, this one, because you have to like void the overflow, and then what's the point of having more output than seeds in? Yeah. In this current state that I'm in with the recipes that I'm using, is the thing. So I needed more sulfuric acid. By the way, the whole point of going up here and doing this was I needed more sulfuric acid production. That was the idea. Because I'm making a few more things that need sulfuric acid at the moment. Okay. I've also like expanded the mall building stuff, if I can even find where I put these buildings in all of this mess. So things here, I'm now making Yadles. I'm now making the buildings for the Yadles. I have the buildings for the Novens, and I've set up the buildings for the Bodos. But as it turns out, Bodos need this stuff called phosphate glass, as well as biopolymer, as well as aerogel, to even make the Mark 1 of no, these are Dilmos, of Dilmos. So for Dilmos, yeah, quite a few things for the Mark 1. Quite a few things for the Mark 1. Also, we've got Arcod buildings going. Fat Eye will require super steel for the Mark 1. The Crydrin, I have the Mark 1 Crydrin going, but the Mark II requires neuromorphic chips, because of course they do. And then the Vonix Mark 1 building is going to require Circuit 3s and neuromorphic chips and super steel. So those are some things. Some things. Also, somewhere right here, grease tables. I realized I didn't have grease tables at all, so now I do. And yeah, so one other thing. So I have gold now, right? Which means I can start thinking about Circuit 3s. Here's the thing about Circuit 3s. Overall, they're fine, but Circuit 3s have had this additional item added to them, thanks to Pi Alien Life, called the neuromorphic chip. Yeah, there's a slight issue in going in here that I noticed, and it doesn't actually have to do anything with the actual neuromorphic chip itself, realistically. All the way down this list. By the way, this is all Circuit 3s. This is all Circuit 3s. But anyway, yeah, the neuromorphic chips are made from empty neuromorphic chips. The empty neuromorphic chips, and by the way, the chips are consumed in this process, so there's like what's even the point? What's even the point of having an empty chip into a full chip if you're consuming the full chip? Why does empty need to like exist as a thing when you're not returning an empty? But regardless, the empty chip looks okay. I mean, if we look at this empty chip, we need a half per second for 3 out on circuit 3s. That half per second is going to require 1 paramagnetic material per second. 1. All right? Everything else here looks pretty reasonable. This is all fine. It's a bit much on the neuroprocessors, but we can get around that in other ways. But just, 1 paramagnetic material. Paramagnetic material takes 10 myoglobin per second to make a half a neuromorphic chip per second. Okay, well, what's required to make 10 myoglobin? 41.67 meat urea, powdered phosphate rocks, and 208.4 cyanic. You know, over half my current production of cyanic, probably more more phosphate rocks than I am currently producing. Definitely way more urea. Yes, this is with 20% productivity, so normally this is like 50 plus on these. This is with 20% productivity added in here. And yeah, and with 20% productivity doing the phosphate rocks into powdered, it's 70 rocks per second to get the myoglobin for 1 paramagnetic material per second. One, just one. 42 meat urea and powdered phosphate with productivity. I mean, it should be obvious, right? What the issue is here. Like that is obviously a problem. Now, if not alien life, not as much of a problem. Meat is a bit easier without alien life. And urea is absolutely a lot easier without alien life. It's still a pain in the rear end, but with alien life, it's just even worse. Yes, and this is not to mention that paramagnetic material is an item that is fairly ubiquitous in the mid-late game at the Mark III phase. So paramagnetic material gets used in the vast majority of Mark III stuff. Well, of the stuff that you use on a regular basis, i.e., automated factories, filters, gasifiers. Even the nanomaterial factory, the centrifugal pans, those are all really big things. Biofactory slaughterhouses, the crackers, even some alien life stuff at Mark III is using these things. But in particular, metallic glass is in here as another really big one that uses stuff. We've got like our high-tech bots and our stuff for space science uses it. Stuff for, I think, utility. This one's utility or circuit 4s. Yeah, utility on here. And alien enzymes. So we have an item here that it's used directly in for purple science. And hello! Welcome to my ranting and raving. But yeah, alien enzymes. So it's used in purple, yellow, and space science. This paramagnetic material is used in purple, yellow, and white. Production, utility, and space science. You're going to need a lot more than 1 per second of this in a full playthrough of the Pi Suite, but which in the current state is going to mean that your factory to produce it is going to be larger than the rest of your factory. I'm not kidding. The factory to make the paramagnetic material is going to be larger than the entirety of the rest of your factory combined, due to the myoglobin requirement on it. It being 10 to 1, and myoglobin requiring so much meat and urea and powdered and cyanic, frankly. Though when I'm not as concerned about cyanic's existence as I am about the other things in the recipe, you should be scared and running for your life screaming. Now, there's other inherent balance issues, I think, going into space science and such, involving the antelope in particular, and some of the other stuff, and utility science for the perfect sample or whatever that's required in that. There might be some issue there, but yeah, this is And then you have to look at the neuromorphic chip, because the neuromorphic chip is required in many things as well, like the Mark I Vonix Den. It's required the neuromorphic chip in even Mark II stuff, as well as more Mark III stuff, and Negasium, which is going to be your blue science from biotics, your biotic blue science, aka your beautiful and your glorious doohickeys. These cotton guts, yeah, these guys. Although, where are these guys in this recipe for the Negasium? There they are. Cotton gut Negasium. It's using paramagnetic material in the form of neuromorphic processors, or chips in this case. So yeah, that's a problem. That's a big, huge problem. Now, I did suggest a few things. Step 1 is to increase the myoglobin output, because, I mean, that's, like, obvious. But there are other issues, I think. Now, myoglobin. Let's look at myoglobin itself. It is used exclusively for 2 things total, as well as compost, for some reason. It is used for paramagnetic material and recombinant erythropoietin. Erythropoietin. Poietin? Erythropoietin. Now, this is a real thing. This is a thing that stimulates red blood cell production in bone marrow. So, yeah, there's a reason why it's called erythropoietin. I'm always going to call it protein rather than poietin for some reason, even though there's no R there. And yeah, it's English going downhill with this word. Yes. But yeah, it's a real thing. Erythropoietin. It stimulates red blood cell production. And guess what? It's used in the things that give you increased red, like blood outputs. But this stuff is 1 to 450. This stuff is 1 to 450. It is fine. This use of myoglobin is perfectly fine. When 1 makes 450 used in all of this stuff here, and it's going to be required to complete the game. It is going to be required to complete the game. Now, unfortunately, when it's 10 to 1 on paramagnetic material, that's where the problem lies. In this 10 to 1 requirement. If it was 1 to 1, if this was 1 to 1, now that would be a lot more manageable, because then you go from 40, you would cut all this by a factor of 10, right? You would cut all this for a factor of 10, and that is a lot more reasonable and manageable. Now, even if you cut it down to 2, even if it was down to 2 into 1, yeah, 8, 8, 8, I can live with that. Like, I think I can live with 888 on a high end into this without even touching the myoglobin itself. But yeah, there's lots of options. Either screw around with the myoglobin, cut down the stuff in here by, factor 2 at least. Have these requirements while also changing how much is required in here, because there's no reason why this needs to take 10. No reason whatsoever that this should take 10. It's far less space requirements on the meat urea and the phosphates if this is brought down to 1 or 2. 3 is pushing it by a lot just to get 1 per second of the paramagnetic material when you're going to be needing several per second. But yeah, that's in its current state. This I can't. I just can't. There's no way around it, and it's required to be the game. And yeah, if this stays as it is, just your paramagnetic material is going to be more than half your base. It's like think everything that's happened here in this base thus far, scrunched down, without any space in between, just like the total area of stuff that's been crunched with no extra white space. Think all of that times 2, where the other part of it is just stuff to make paramagnetic material. And yeah, apparently it has already been tweaked. Hey, good. I will look forward to seeing what that tweak actually is. Because, yeah, practical examples, right? This is what it takes. Is like very practical examples, because sometimes, particularly when Immortal's looking at stuff at the very late game, Immortal looks at things like at Mark IV with modules, with like creative mode on, and does point out very valid things, but just the nature of that inherent testing environment is at a state of the game that very few people actually get to. So it is always going to be better to show the more practical examples of, we're trying to get 3 circuit 3s alone, and this is how much meat I would need to produce, and how much urea I would need to produce, and how much phosphate would need to be produced to make 3 circuit 3s per second. Even if we took that down to 1, which realistically a lot of people, I'm sure that anyone who gets up to this point in the game would probably be looking more at 1 per second rather than 3. That's still a significant amount of stuff just for 1 circuit 3. So yes, here's a real world numerical example of why there's a balance issue here, as well as how to fix it. Various methods of how to fix things. That's what is more appreciated, I think, when you show the problem in a practical sense, using things in a state of the game that people can reasonably get to, and then how to fix it. Options for how to fix it. Don't just say, do this. Say why, and then how. Ha, 1 per second is a very good rate. Yes, well, consider that my goal for this series is to have 1 science per second of the sciences. Consider that. How my goal is 1 science per second of the sciences. It's yeah. If you think this is big, if I was actually trying like at that point where I was really going hard at that 1 science per second, we'll be zoomed out this far. Like we'll be at max zoom and probably barely seeing the entirety of the base. I don't know. It depends how much sprawl I do, how much I'm able to compact things with the power of modules. So circuit 3s I was looking at, because circuit 3s are what I need in order to get the rest of the productivity modules and such. So all of the remaining modules at the increased level of modules are going to be circuit 3s. Or aren't going to be unlocked until circuit 3s. And I can continue adding additional stuff to these. I'm pretty sure, yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These are the raw speeds, by the way. Raw speed 8, for reference, is plus 160% to the speed of the building per module. I think the raw productivity 8 is a plus 40%. It is a plus 40% productivity per module on the productivity 8. And we can see here it's circuit 3s, circuit 2s, circuit 3s, circuit 3s, circuit 3s, circuit 3s. And then this is logic boards. Logic boards are circuit 3s and PCB 3s. Now, the processor boards are going to be PCB 4s, which is going to be the issue going past level 5, I think. Going into 6. No, that's processor boards. That's processor boards. That's logic boards. Yeah, getting into level 6 is going to start requiring PCB 4s for these processor boards. So the furthest we need to go is PCB 4s. New Tholins, I think, are in. I think so. Maybe. It depends, really, on the state of everything, really. But, yeah. So, this stuff takes productivity. This stuff takes God modules for the actual boards here. Now, you may... One point of note. So, the... Bob's modules comes with, like, these basic module boards and logic boards and processor boards, in which those other 2 levels also take gold. Well, in the Pi suite, none of the stuff actually uses those 3 things. So nothing actually uses the basic module boards, or the processor boards, or the logic boards. They're all taking the PCBs, actually, I think, is what's replacing them as requirements. So normally, I think this PCB 2 here is supposed to be these basic module boards to produce these things, but no, with Pi suite, it's taking PCB 2s. And with these, it's taking PCB 3s, and with these, it's PCB 4s. So that's a very important thing to note. These are much more difficult to make than normal with Bob's mods and Angel's mods, just inherently on the base stuff here, and then into here. These are very big resource consumers. They hog a ton of stuff to make these. But they also are very powerful. So, very expensive and very powerful, I think, is a bit more closely balanced. And, I can't actually use any God modules on basically anything besides the vanilla stuff. So, another key interesting thing here. Now, one last point to make about productivity modules. So you see these buildings here? Incubators? Doink. So 10% of the time, one of these Arthurian eggs is going to be a twin. Or a full set of 4 are going to be twins 10% of the time. So this would be an example of one of those things that shouldn't have productivity, I would imagine. Not sure if it even has slots in the default configuration. I don't know. This is the incubator building. What I do know is that with the mod setting, startup setting, for Pi core processing, set to double each tier, these buildings have a module slot. The nursery, the level 1 nurseries don't have a module slot, but the level 2s do have module slots, and the level 3s and level 4s. Somehow. Because of this setting. With the normal basic default setting, none of these will have module slots of botanical nurseries. So it looks like these also don't have module slots. So that's a thing that needs to be looked at, is how the module settings are affecting things.